Oui, vous m'entendez? Ah oui, parfait. Okay, so hi everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Johan Dreyer. I'm the president of H2 Antofagasta, which is the Association of Green Hydrogen Project Developers in the north of Chile, which involves 12 companies developing over 15 projects of large and small-scale green hydrogen production and consumption in the Atacama Desert, which is the mining hub in the north of Chile. So I would like to first of all thank the invitation today to participate here. It's a pleasure on my side. A little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Chile. However, I live here in France. I graduated from Sciences Po, master in energy, and now I work, of course, in the development of the international hydrogen industry with a focus, of course, in the north of Chile, where I'm from. So before starting, may I ask if you can raise your hand who has been in Chile here before? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so less than half. Probably you're well aware that Chile it's well known because of its nature, of its very exuberant nature, right? The driest desert in the world in the north, Atacama, the windiest land in the south, which is Patagonia, right next to the Antarctica. So historically, Chile has been and still is famous for its nature, for its sun, for its wind, right? We have the largest solar energy plants in the north, but also the largest telescopes as well in the north, because, of course, it's perfect for observing the skies. But also, nowadays we see strong momentum as well for the development of green hydrogen, right? We have certain champions around the world, which are no longer the hidden champions, but are already quite clear who are the countries that have the most competitive production cost for green hydrogen, because they have excellent solar resource or very good wind resource as well. Australia, Middle East, Chile, Maghreb, the north of Africa, and each of these countries have their own strengths and weaknesses, and we're all, of course, working together in order to develop this first generation of hydrogen projects. So the idea of today's presentation, of course, is to tell you in detail, of course, what's going on in Chile, mostly in the two main hubs, which are Atacama and Patagonia, give you an overview of the main trends, and also, and very specifically, about the projects, right? I think we're all here interested on that, on what's happening, who's investing, what kind of projects, what size, timing. So today I want to give you a little bit more in detail about this. A little bit of a press overview on what's been happening over the last 2 years regarding Chile and the hydrogen sector. The Chilean diplomacy has been very active in, of course, boosting the global partnerships for exporting Chilean hydrogen, right? Which is funny because we still need to bring investment to, first of all, build the projects. So it's a little bit of the chicken and egg problem, right? We need off-takers in Europe, in Asia, but at the same time, for doing the project financing, we need to bring as well financing from developed markets and economies, because the Chilean economy, it's small, we're 18 million people, so of course, and this is a very capex intensive industry, and hence the diplomacy of Chilean hydrogen is very active in this regard, on finding off-takers here in Europe, but at the same time, bringing investment to the country. As you can see, there has been MOUs signed with the port of Rotterdam, with the port of Hamburg, with Singapore as well, the European Union as well, very recently signed a trade agreement with Chile in terms of key minerals. By this we understand lithium. We all know that lithium, copper, and hydrogen are the commodities of the 21st century. And in Chile, of course, we have the largest copper mines, the largest lithium mines, and now probably the largest green hydrogen projects in the world as well. So Chile is clearly a strategic partner to Europe and to the developed economies that are looking to decarbonize their economies. And last but not least, very few months ago on COP27, Chile as well signed some very interesting deals with the World Bank and the Interdevelopment Bank as well for securing financing for the green hydrogen sector in Chile, over $500 million. So let's go on the fundamentals of renewable hydrogen in Chile. I'm not going to explain you on what green hydrogen is, because I'm pretty sure we all know what it is, but I would like to go more in detail on why Chile is considered a champion and why we have over 45 projects currently under development. So first of all, why Atacama? Why Patagonia? Because, of course, it's the places in the world that have the cheapest cost of solar energy production and onshore wind production. As you can see here, this is from the IEA, and the dark red spots are, of course, those places in the world in which we find the highest wind and the most intense solar radiation per square meter, which are the north of Chile and the south of Chile. The first slides I'm gonna base on information that was done by the Chilean Ministry of Energy with McKinsey on 2020. So it's a little bit old, we could say. You know, the hydrogen industry evolves super rapidly. So from one year to another, of course, we're very aware that costs change. And however, this is the official hydrogen strategy of the country. Chile was one of the first countries in the world to announce a hydrogen strategy in late 2020, the first one in Latin America. And the figures that we see here, of course, first of all, is that the capacity factor is the best in the world for both solar energy production and onshore wind production. As you see here, compared to other of the champions, or let's say Australia, Saudi Arabia, the US, and the European Union, for PV, it's 37%, and for onshore wind, it's 70 to 75%, which means, of course, that we have the cheapest cost for renewable energy production in the world, or LCOE. Another interesting factor as well, as we can see on the right, is that Chile is a very narrow country. It's a very long but very narrow country. So ports are available pretty much everywhere in the country. And in the two main hubs, which are Atacama Desert and Magallanes, this is not the exception. It's only 180 kilometers to the nearest coastline. For example, if we compare it to Australia, which is a continent/country, some of the most interesting sites for solar energy production are inland, hundreds of kilometers inland, and very far away from ports, right? Which, at the same time, it's very intensive in all the infrastructure and logistics to export that hydrogen and that ammonia. As I told you, LCOE is the cheapest one in the world, so center, north, and south. I'm going to focus probably on north and south. North is Atacama Desert, south is Patagonia. As you can see in Atacama, we have an LCOE under $20 the megawatt hour, which is highly competitive. And also in the south, for onshore wind, it's under $25. At the same time, this translates in a very low LCOH, or levelized cost of hydrogen. We see, again, north, south, center, that Chile is targeting already by 2025 to be under the $1.5, $2 the kilogram. And the official strategy of the country is to break the $1 the kilogram barrier by 2030. Again, these are 2020 numbers. Now we're seeing that it's a little bit tough to actually reach that number. It's probably going to be maybe 2032, 2030. It's being discussed, of course, but we believe that we could be at $1 the kilogram by 2030 of LCOH. And again, compared to the other champions, it's the cheapest one in the world. This is like the official numbers of the hydrogen strategy of the country. Probably I would focus on the gigawatt numbers. So the official target is to have 5 gigawatts of electrolysis capacity installed and operating by 2025 and 25 gigawatts by 2030. One thing, of course, it's to have these very low generation costs. But also, Chile, it's a big country, and with very scarce population. We're only 18 million people, and we have around 35 gigawatts of installed capacity in the country of generation, of energy generation. So, and the potential for producing energy or renewable energy is 70 times this figure. So basically, we are transforming from a net importer of energy to a potential exporter of renewable energy. And until very recently, we couldn't export this energy to global markets because, of course, we needed transmission lines. But now, with hydrogen and ammonia, there's finally a carrier for which to store and, of course, export this renewable energy surplus. So let's go more in detail on the project landscape itself. This slide is not very nice. So it's very populated, of course, of logos and everything. But here you can see the country from, so north is the left, south is the right. And these are the projects which are currently under development stage. We have 46 projects, and which are mostly located in 3 main hubs. So Atacama, the central region, and the south. Here we see some familiar logos like ENGIE, AES, Linde, RWE, Total, Alfanar, CIP, Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, and so on and so forth. We see that the main energy players are already investing and developing projects for a while now in Chile. Now, if we sort of like digest this information, sort of like to prioritize or let's say analyze more in detail the 3 main hubs, Antofagasta, which is the one I know the best and I represent, it's mostly solar, wind, and grid. So it's a very mature renewable energy market because renewables has been around for over 10 years. So Chile basically had the most expensive energy in the world 10 years ago because the mining sector were a net importer of energy. So we imported the oil and the gas from global markets, and we had energy costs of over $120 the megawatt hour. So it was perfect for solar energy production. So Chile was the first market in which no subsidies were needed for renewable energy generation because it was already competitive. They were competing with prices of $120 a megawatt hour. So we have a very mature grid. I will go more in detail afterwards, but we have 3.5 gigawatts of renewable energy installed capacity in the north. In the project size, we have both megawatt and gigawatt scale projects. So in the north, we have some local offtake because of the mining activity, but also we have large-scale gigawatt projects for exports. I mean on electrolysis capacity. The preferred carrier, it's basically all of them. So we have H2 projects, we have ammonia projects, and we have e-fuels projects. For exports, it's ammonia. H2 is for local mobility applications, so trains, forklifts, and trucks. And e-fuels are for blending in the mining sector. Offtake is local and exports. We have 19 projects being developed, and with expected commissioning dates of 2025, the first generation of projects, so the small ones, and 2027 onwards would be the gigawatt scale projects. We expect over 10 gigawatts of installed capacity of gigawatts by 2030, and the infrastructure is well developed. I think this is important to mention because the mining sector has been around for over a century, and we have the largest desalination plants in Latin America. We have already several gigawatts of installed capacity of renewable generation. The central region, I will be very, very straightforward because I would say is not the focus or not the main hub, but still we have over 13 projects. It's still also solar, wind, and grid. These are smaller projects though, megawatt scale, and there's also well-developed infrastructure. And in the south, in Patagonia, it's wind off-grid, so there's no grid in the south. These are projects which are island projects, so they're large-scale, mostly ammonia projects over the gigawatt of electrolysis capacity. And these projects have their own dedicated wind farms. For example, Total is developing a 10 gigawatt project of electrolysis here with 20 gigawatts of wind capacity. So we see some very, very big projects here, and they're all for exports because there's no local offtake in Patagonia. So we see 9 projects, and we expect over 15 gigawatts of installed capacity. And the infrastructure is scarce. So this region has historically been maybe an isolated region, and hence there's no desalination, there's no grid, and there's few pipelines as well. So some work needs to be done as well there. Very rapidly, so these are the projects that secured subsidies from the Chilean government in 2020. So the Chilean government allocated $50 million to 6 projects. So you see there ENGIE, Air Liquide, Linde, Enagas Acciona, and HIF, which is Highly Innovative Fuels, which is the first e-fuels project in Latin America, which was inaugurated a couple of months ago in December. As you all know, $50 million, it's peanuts for the capex of green hydrogen projects, right? But still, I think this shows the commitment of the Chilean government to boost this industry, and it's expected to replace the mining industry in Chile by 2040. So I think this is kind of like the flagship project in Chile at the moment. It's called Hydrogène, and it was developed by HIF, by the company. It started operations in 2022 in December, and it's expected to have commercial operation by March 2023. It will produce 350 tons per year of e-methanol and 130,000 liters per year of e-gasoline. And the off-taker is Porsche, and they will supply to their experience centers and their mobile one super cup. So I'll go very rapidly on the Antofagasta region because I see I have 5 minutes left. So very rapidly here, largest copper mines in the world, largest lithium mines in the world as well in the north. 3.5 gigawatts of renewable capacity and 20 gigawatts of renewable energy generation under development. I think this is very important because we have a surplus of approved production projects that have not secured PPAs for offtake of energy because there's a constraint of transmission capacities to the consumption centers in the central region where the capital city is and most of the population. So I think this is interesting for green hydrogen project developers because there's the opportunity of secure competitive energy cost for their on-grid green hydrogen projects. We have, well, basically the first CSP plant as well, geothermal in Latin America. And the largest desalination plant in Latin America. We also have a very complex ecosystem in the north because we have not only production but also offtake. I think this is important. The mining sector and the logistics are already moving towards hydrogen mobility, and they are already signing MOUs for offtake, and some are even tendering for supply contracts in the short term. So this is different compared, for example, to the south, and offers, of course, a shorter logistics value chain. Very rapidly, these are 10 projects we mapped in the north of Chile, in Antofagasta region. Maybe we can focus on the middle column, the one on the megawatt of electrolysis. So you can see that we have from gigawatt scale projects to very small R&D projects as well. And on the, so we see producers, R&D, and hybrid. Hybrid, I mean captive, right? So basically you produce and also you consume the hydrogen in the same project. You see exports of ammonia, fuel cell testing, freight trains, road trucks, forklifts, and so on. I think for the companies here at Hyvolution, this is very interesting, and there will be one Hyvolution in this June in Chile, which is the first one in Latin America. So there is, of course, a strong interest for the solutions, technologies that are available in the hydrogen market for these kind of applications. And also the COD, as you can see, it's already from 2023 onwards, 2024 until 2030, of course, for the larger projects. This is a map that we did with a leading consulting company on the projects themselves in the region. So this is the Antofagasta region. To the left, you have the Pacific Ocean. To the right, the Andes Range. And most of them focus in two hubs. The north, it's a LNG port, and that's where we are looking to export the large-scale ammonia projects. And in the south, that's an industrial cluster. That's where we have cement factories, copper smelters, and there's also a strong interest there for offtake. So we see kind of like these two very different models in the region itself. And a little bit as well on the infrastructure available. So here you can see in green, those are the green hydrogen projects. Orange are gas pipelines. Blue are water pipelines. Pink triangles are desalination plants. Pink circles are mining operations, large-scale mining, over 500,000 tons per year of copper production. So as you can see, and the white one, it's the train infrastructure. So we see that the projects are mostly focused on the coast, both for exports, but also closer to the industrial clusters. This means as well that the mining sector, it's kind of like a, I wouldn't say even a fast follower, so the large mines are still not investing in green hydrogen projects themselves. Like in South Africa, for example, we have the Nugen project between Anglo and Engie. In Chile, we still see sort of like some hesitance from the large mines to move forward, but because they are at very high altitude. So from the coastline to the border with Argentina, there's 5,000 meters of difference. So most of the mining operations are over 2,000 meters of altitude. And this is tough for the performance of fuel cells. And hence, ENGIE is working in a project, the one that we see more in the right, so this one, it's actually at one of the mining operations because they're testing the performance of fuel cells at this altitude. So that's why I think the mining sector in Chile is still a bit hesitant, whereas like the value chain, it's moving forward with trains, forklifts, and trucks. And some takeaways very quickly. So the H2 ecosystem, I'll focus in Antofagasta because that's the one I represent. Benefits from legacy and mature industries like mining, renewable energy generation, and desalination, which are already mature and in place, providing the necessary infrastructure and capabilities for rapid deployment and scale-up. Also, there's a broad range of companies which are already suppliers of these industries and who are actively looking for H2 technologies. I think this is a strong opportunity for technology vendors to actually get in touch with these players because they're all looking to provide services to the future green hydrogen industry. Another important project is that the solar wind grid battery H2 production model, which is a standard in Antofagasta, will be the one that will be also dominant at a global scale. In Patagonia, it's onshore wind, which is not very replicable globally, whereas solar with grid, with battery, is replicable in the Middle East, in Australia, in South Africa. So that's kind of like the model that we're seeing, which will dominate, and hence the best practices can be shared with projects around the world. There's strong interest from players in the mining value chain for local offtake of green hydrogen, e-fuels, green ammonia, and having this local offtake, of course, shortens the value chain. It's easier, of course, to sell your hydrogen to a local mining player than exporting it to Asia and Europe. And last but not least, there's this interest of the mining sector on H2 applications, but there's still no clear position on major technology transitions in the big mines, right, involving, for example, mining trucks. So we're still waiting on how the large mining players will move forward, either direct electrification or hydrogen, but at least we see a strong momentum on the value chain of the mining sector, big projects for exports all along Chile. So in the north, in the center, and in the south. So I think I'm done with the time. Yeah. I don't know if maybe there are any questions. We can have the last 5 minutes on that. Yes? I think maybe this one works. I don't know. No, but it's fine.
Okay, it's fine. Do you have any agreement already? Thank you. Thank you for presentation. Very interesting. Do you have any agreement that already signed for export with European ports or any countries in Europe?
There's MOUs signed, but more than that, it's tough. Like there's a strong interest, for example, on the German project, what's the name of the contract for difference that Germany is conducting, to actually bring closer producers with off-takers in Europe, but that's private to private. Like the Chilean government, of course, can secure MOUs on understandings with Rotterdam, with Hamburg, but then more than that, it's need to be between projects, so project and off-takers.
So you already secured this MOUs with?
Yeah. Yeah, that was signed last year. So of course, that's the idea is to understand the logistics in the ports and the future value chain when the Chilean ammonia or the Chilean hydrogen arrives to European ports. Of course, how it can be shipped or transported to the off-takers inland.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think there was a question there.
I have a slightly different question. We see here in Europe there are many problems, or one aspect slowing down the development of green hydrogen is the public opposition to certain renewable projects. Is this an issue in Chile? Should we expect maybe the number of the projects lower, or is it something that's fully accepted by the public?
That's a great question. The NIMBY effect, right? Like not in my backyard. I think it's very different in the north than in the south. So in the north, where I'm from, we're more used to large infrastructure projects like the mining sector, the desalination sector as well. So there's less opposition from the populations on these kind of projects. And of course, because it is a desert, there is less environmental concerns. There still are, but less. Whereas in Patagonia, it's a new industry, and it's not a industry-intense region either. So, for example, there's strong environmental opposition down there because in the north, for example, we have this solar energy and wind energy around for over a decade. So there has been several environmental studies on the impact of these farms and these centrals. Whereas in the south, in Patagonia, there wasn't a single megawatt of wind capacity until last year. So, and Patagonia, it's way more alive and with more biodiversity than Atacama. So, of course, there is a strong concern on understanding the environmental impact and effects of these very large projects. We're talking about thousands of hectares of land for these onshore wind projects. So there's an internal discussion going on in all the regions in which hydrogen will be developed. But it's funny because at the same time, these are the tourism capitals as well of Chile, Atacama and Patagonia. People go there to see, of course, the nature, right? So we need to be very aware on how we will boost and develop this industry and where, because the idea is not to sacrifice one industry for another one. So, and of course, because we are a democracy, we have to have this debate. It better takes a little bit longer, but do it right, and not do it like, as it happened with the mining sector in the north, that there was not much sustainability behind it decades ago, and now we have some that we call sacrifice areas in the north, because it was not sustainably done. So to answer your question, I think in the north is more favorable, and in the south they're still working on it, on the opposition. I think we're done. Thank you very much.